So lately, Adobe has been giving us a closer look at the new tools and technologies they're working on, especially with Photoshop Beta. In fact, we got our first taste of generative fill and generative expand technologies that are powered by Adobe Firefly in Photoshop Beta last year. And with the recent update to Photoshop Beta that just came out a few days ago, we're getting access to some new improvements to the quality of the generative AI used, as well as easier ways to add it to your Photoshop workflow. Now, I know that generative AI can be a touchy topic for some photographers, but I also genuinely believe that everyone should at least give it a shot because it can be a really powerful addition to your post processing toolkit. That's why my goal is to always show you how these tools can specifically benefit photographers. So, with that, let's dive in. All right, so here you can see we have Photoshop Beta, and obviously, if you don't have it installed, you'll want to do that first. It's pretty straightforward. You'll just go to the Creative Cloud app over here, and then you'll click on Apps, and then you should have up here this little tab called Beta, and then you'll have Photoshop Beta. And if it's not installed, this button will say Install like these other apps. And then once it's installed, you will have it here. And of course, you can always remove it if you want to uninstall it. Click on the ellipse over here, and then you can click on Uninstall, and then you'll just have the production version of Photoshop installed. Now, the way that I kind of approach these updates to the generative fill technologies in Photoshop Beta is one, I'll show you in a minute, the quality is much better of the stuff that's introduced into your document, but also the way that you use it, it's more intuitive. The ways that you can incorporate it are just easier. So I'll show you that first. All right, so the first thing I want to show you is how you can actually generate an image from scratch. And that's where I see a quality of life improvement. So I think we should actually first start with the production version of Photoshop, which I have here. So this is Photoshop 2024. If you have Photoshop installed, this is the version that you've got. Now, before, if you wanted to use AI, which Adobe is calling Firefly, you would first have to make a selection. And if you wanted to create something from scratch, you would basically press Command or Control A to select the entire image. And then you can click on Generative Fill, and then you can type in your prompt. And it's pretty straightforward. There's really not much to it. But let me show you how it's improved in the beta. So let's go here. And now you actually have three ways to generate an image. And you don't have to make any selections first. First, you have this button over here on this fly out menu bar. It says Generate Image. Second, you have this option here at the very bottom of the toolbar, that little icon that looks like a picture icon with some sparkles and that curved arrow. And then third is if you go to the edit menu, you'll see Generate Image. So three different ways to use Firefly to generate an image from scratch. And to me, anytime you can make something like that easier, that's just better. But it's not just how you access the tool. When you go over here, if you remember in the other version of Photoshop, when I click on Generative Fill, you just have this text prompt here and you just type in what you want. But in Photoshop Beta, watch what happens when I click on Generate Image. You now have this window that if you've used Firefly before, this should be very familiar. And it's great because it gives you a lot of added control and flexibility in terms of how you use Firefly to generate your image. First, you'll see the text box. You should be familiar with this. This is where you'll type what you want to generate. But then you also have these other options. You have content type. So you can either choose something that's more artistic in terms of the medium used or something that's more photorealistic. So generally for us, like I said, when I teach AI, I teach it more for photographers. So I would say photo would be the option you'd want to use. And then you also have these two other style options. I'm going to go over reference image in a few minutes, but it's here. And then there's also effects where if you click here, you'll see these different categories. So you can have Firefly reference one of these effects when it generates what you type in. And so you can see there are these different options here. Some of them are really cool. Like actually, Cyberpunk, I really like a lot. But again, these are stylized, so they may not be your cup of tea. But if you click on it, you'll see that this effect here has been selected. And what's cool is you can actually select multiple effects. So you're not just limited to one. And really the kind of sky's the limit. You can have a ton of fun with this as you're experimenting with how Firefly works within Photoshop. Now, like I said here, I don't want any of these, so I'm just going to cancel them out. And all you'd want to do here is type in your prompt, what you want to generate, and click generate. But that leads me to the next improvement. And this is actually huge. This should not be overlooked. with Photoshop Beta, you now have access to Firefly 3 and the improvements that Firefly 3 brings in terms of just the quality of what it generates is it's really awesome. And I already have some stuff generated here. You can see here, let's actually just start in Firefly 3. So all I did, nothing special. I created a new document just like this. It was just a blank document. And I typed in a close up of an elephant. And you can see here, like always, you get 3 different options here in terms of the elephant. And I think you'll agree that these are actually really, really good. But the improvement to the quality, it's best illustrated when you see what happens in Photoshop. So this is again the current version of Photoshop. And here is what happens again, the exact same thing. I created a new blank document and I typed in a close-up of an elephant and just look at, I mean, it just doesn't look nearly as good. It looks, it looks super AI generated. And when you kind of switch between them here, so like, let's just go between this one and that one. I mean, it just, everything here just, I mean, it's okay. Obviously, it's, it's an elephant that was divined out of a text prompt, but this to me is awesome. So again, I would say really of all of the updates and improvements that is in this version of Photoshop Beta, the access to Firefly 3 is the biggest one. I mean, that is huge. And so it's really cool that we now have that. And it's indicative of what we're going to get in Photoshop eventually when it's updated for the production version. All right, the next thing I want to show you has to do with using a reference image when you want to add something to an existing photo. So this is a photo that I took many years ago in Nebraska. And let's say I want to add a red barn over here. That's what I want. Well, normally what I would do is I would probably just take, either the lasso tool or this kind of rectangular marquee tool, and I would make a selection. I'd click on generative fill. I type in here a red barn, and then I'd click on generate. And you'd see that Firefly would add this barn. You of course have these other options and they all look great. But let's say you already have a photo that you want Photoshop to use as a reference when it's generating a new barn. That's what reference image is, and super cool. So let's go ahead here. I'm going to delete this. Let's go ahead and make another rectangular marquee selection, just kind of something like that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to type generative fill. I'll type a red barn, but before I click on generate, you see this little icon over here? It looks like a photo with the arrow pointing up. I'm going to click on it over here, and then I'm going to click on choose image. And I already have a photo here of a red barn. It's just a generic photo, but it gives me an ability to tell Photoshop to use this as a reference. So I'm going to highlight it and click on open. You can now see that there's a little check mark indicating that a reference image is selected. And then let's go ahead and click on generate. And you can see that it actually did a pretty good job in terms of using the reference image. So it kind of is aligned and oriented similarly. And we also, of course, have 2 other variations. Now remember, reference image isn't meant to just copy the photo that you're using. It's just telling Photoshop to kind of look at it and try to recreate whatever you type in using this image as a reference. But still, it's really cool that we have that ability. Now, while we're here, one of the other things that I want to show you, and this is also very, very important, but normally when Photoshop generates something using Firefly, the maximum resolution is 1024 by 1024, and then it's kind of stretched out. But we now have the ability to use super resolution to double the height and the width. So you can see here on the top left of each of these thumbnails, there's this icon here. If you click on this, you'll see this dialog box appear saying enhance detail. And basically it adds just a little bit more details. So you can see here, if I kind of zoom in a little bit and I toggle undo and then redo, you can see how there is a bit more detail here. So that's really cool. And of course you can apply the enhanced detail to any of the variations just by clicking on this icon over here. When you do apply enhanced detail, you'll see that it's grayed out, so you can't do it again. Another thing that I want to show you is, let's say you kind of like this version here, this variation, but you want to see some other options. If you click on the ellipse over here, you now have this option called generate similar, which will generate 3 additional variations based on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And you'll see now you have a few other options. I actually kind of like both of these here. So, I can go ahead and click on enhance detail on this one and go here and click on enhance detail here just to compare them. And I think it's cool. It's just a lot of fun. It's really awesome that I can add this red barn using a reference image and then improve the detail a bit more. Now, while generative fill may not be your cup of tea, I totally get that. Generative expand is a whole different story. And that's something I definitely think all photographers should, at the very least, be aware of what it is and how it works, because it seriously can save your photos. So the enhanced detail functionality that I just showed you really comes into play when you pair it with generative expand. So let me show you that right now. All right, so here you can see this is another photo I took in Nebraska. I don't know why I'm on this Nebraska photo kick, but for me, the thing that I always kind of didn't like was just how close I put this road to the edge of the frame. And so again, generative expand would be perfect here because I can use AI to kind of expand this canvas. Now, I've already done a video on how generative expand works. I'll include it at the end of this one, but the kind of short Cliff's Notes version is I'm going to go ahead and zoom out just a little bit, and then I'm going to press on C to go to the crop mode. You can also click on this icon here in the toolbar, the little crop icon here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and drag out just a little bit, like right around there. Basically visualizing whether if I had some extra space, would this feel better to me? Now, the key here is under this fill dropdown, you'll want to make sure that generative expand is selected over here. And then I'm going to click on the check mark. And now you can see I have these 3 different variations. And it just feels a lot better. Like this one looks great here. This one also looks good, but I'll stick with this third one. And the reason why I'm showing this to you is because you can also pair that enhanced detail functionality with the added pixels that you just introduced. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And it just gets a little sharper here. So if I, again, zoom in a little bit, you can see here, if I undo that, you see how that area that was added, it just looks a lot blurrier. But when we use the enhanced detail, I mean, that's significant. That's a major improvement there. So you can see here how it just, the photo feels a lot better. And of course, you can expand it even more if you want. But I wanted to show you how it pairs really nicely with enhanced detail. All right, so the last thing that I want to show you, it's another one of those workflow improvements. You can do this technically in Photoshop in production, but it just makes things a little easier. When you do it in Photoshop currently, it requires a few extra steps. So let me show you what that is. All right, so you can see here I have this stock photo of this woman holding a glass of red wine. And you can see that she's on this kind of boring background. And let's say you want to have her maybe in a wine bar, something a little bit more festive. Well, the process now of doing that is a lot easier. I'm going to go ahead. You can see now I have this button over here called Remove Background. I'm going to click on it. And Photoshop does a really great job of removing the background. You can also see that this layer mask has been created, so that's also really convenient if you have to paint in some of the original image. But you now have this generate background button. So again, it just streamlines the workflow. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on it, and I'm just going to type in wine bar, and then let's click on generate. And so you can see we have a few different variations here. That's not bad. That's not bad either. And just like before, I can go ahead and enhance the details of that background. Or I can go ahead and click on the ellipse here and try my luck with something similar. And you can see we have these other options here. Actually, this one is perfect. So I'll go ahead and enhance those details one more time. And there you go. All right, so I hope all the stuff I showed you gets you excited, at least excited enough to give it a shot if you haven't. Especially if you have Photoshop installed, you might as well install the beta and give it a shot. It is good to know how to use these tools. Whether you actually want to use them or not, I totally understand, but these tools are getting better and better, and I think it's important. I think it really is important to know how to use them. To that end, you should check out this video because it will give you even more examples of how this generative AI technology in Photoshop can directly improve photographers' workflows. Of course, if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. Be sure to click on the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified of all future videos, and I'll see you on the next one.